Welcome to Martini Time. Boy, is it hot here in Southside Virginia. Stuff's starting to dry up. And so this afternoon I went over to Cambridge. Oh, by the way, I forget, I don't know who's watching this, but you're from all over. And I live in Blackstone, which is Southside Virginia. And it's kind of like South Central. If you draw a line through the middle of Virginia, it would be south to North Carolina. And it's before you get to the mountains. And it's after you leave the flat plains of tidewater. It's kind of a rolling hill country. South of Charlottesville. And Virginia has different cultures in it. You've got the tidewater culture, which is, of course, the Norfolk, and the bustling is almost like God was fishing and dropped a can of worms there and left it, And then you've got it's all peanut farms going of flat, sandy soil. And then you have the Southside Virginia, which historically was small tobacco farms, rolling hills. And the tobacco that was grown here was dark-fired tobacco, which was the labor-intensive tobacco, ideal for families, because you had to pick the tobacco by hand. You couldn't just cut it all down. You had to pick it as it ripened up the stalk. And then you had to tie it together and dry it in these barns. It's called dark-fired. And they had to have heat to dry this tobacco. And then it was hauled to the local auction warehouses in every town. Blackstone had 4 tobacco warehouses. And my wife grew up here, and her father worked with tobacco, and everybody worked with tobacco. And the towns, particularly Blackstone, was a tobacco town, had 4 warehouses. Railroad stopped here, got your tobacco auctioned off, got your money, you went into town, spent it at the hardware stores. You had an account that you built up a credit during the year, and you paid it off when the tobacco was sold. And all the farms were family farms, self-sufficient, so you had a hog and you had a garden. And it was a way of life that is long gone. And it lasted, I don't know, I guess a couple of 100 years. And Eldridge Bagley is a local painter. And I went to see his, he had a showing in Cambridge, which is a town 10 miles away. And I thought I'd go talk to him, because being, Sunday afternoon at the library, nobody would be there. It was packed. But Eldridge Bagley is a landscape painter of the tobacco farms. He's now in his early 70s. And I've known him since the late 80s, when I came here and started writing with the Courier Record. And in the early 90s, so we had this, I was doing video then, so we had this idea to do a, called The Journey of the Heart, which would be a biography of him. And we had the idea to video the stages of the tobacco, from the planting to the cutting away the shoots, to the harvesting, and to the taking it to the auction. So we filmed the seasons of the tobacco farmer, and then we did a biography of Eldridge seasons as the artist. His early art is cutting off the shoots of art that didn't go in the direction he wanted, and taking the art to the gallery, you see. So it was really nice. So he's been selling that. He made a DVD of it. It was a VC video and then a DVD. And but I've known Eldridge. So I see him every year when he would show up at the Blackstone Craft Show. And this is one of his paintings that I had on my computer. And I'm titling this, The Zen of Eldridge Bagley. Now this reminds me of the Japanese, the Zen paintings. Where does look at the softness and the rolling of the land? It's like this. All of his paintings are about the earth as a mother, and the humans live in harmony on the earth, and in the various stages of the tobacco season, either in their work or in their rest. But it's always kind of like this: where does the human life end, and where does the farming begin, and where does the earth? Where are the boundaries here? It was all a harmonious feeling. In his paintings, you could touch the feeling of the resting in the earth, and the earth taking care of you, and this grounding in the earth as a living being, this great mother that takes care of the human families that scratch her back, like you see, just like she's lying there, letting the humans, scratch her back, and oh, it feels so good. You see, just scratch a little over here, she says. Oh, a little more right there. Oh, yes. So I've always kind of like connected with connected with Eldridge and his art, because he grew up here on Tobacco Farm, and he stayed in contact with his roots. He's not on Facebook, he doesn't have the internet, and always drove his old car till it fell apart, and stayed in the house he grew up in, and he roams the area to get inspiration for his paintings. And he does maybe 20 a year, and then he takes them to the market in Richmond and sells them, and then he goes to craft shows and sells prints. You see, he's made a living off of his art, just like the tobacco farmer made a living off of his tobacco. And I wrote a story back in the late 80s, I guess, or 90s, Courier Record. You can't read it because it's backwards, but here he is back in the early 90s, and. Here he is now. This was an article about the artist, meeting the artist in Cambridge, you see. And he stayed fresh. He stayed creative. He's got it's like he stuck a pipe into the ground, and the art flows up, It's a wellspring. And he's been very careful not to disconnect that pipe, And so, in his earlier years, his art flew off in other directions, and it cut it off. It wasn't his art, So he stayed with the same format. And if you go around in Southside Virginia, most homes have one of his paintings. All the banks, and the offices have his paintings. He is really like the articulation of a way of life in Southside Virginia that is still in people's memories. And you can still drive, going to Cambridge, past several farms with tobacco growing. But now the Mexicans pick it, you see. So this... So you drive around here, you see a lot of old farm buildings. You see old tobacco barns. You see the old farmhouses. Now they're dilapidating, falling apart. And in that, there's great beauty in that. But this way of life of and the irony is here, there's a great irony with Eldridge and his art and the tobacco, because, we look at it and say, oh yeah, tobacco. So they were happily growing this devastating weed that killed millions of people with lung cancer and everything. But he's really not painting about tobacco. Of course, there's a shadow side to tobacco, and of course these were like the tobacco farmers were like the people growing cocaine in Afghanistan. Poppy in Afghanistan, or cocaine in Colombia, these local farmers growing the drug for the drug pushers, Well, all that aside, But his painting is not about that. But it just uses of course, that's that's what he grew up in. That's the ground that he grew up in. But his paintings are not about tobacco. No, it's about being connected to the earth. It's being in rhythm with the earth. These paintings are about the dying agrarian society of America, the agrarian culture of the farmer, small farmer, not the corporate farmer with the big machines that just chops up everything. No, the family farmer, where the whole family, the children, the women, the men, all farmed the product, and children grew up with dirt under their fingernails, and everybody had a job. You didn't have adolescents then. You had children, and then you had adults. There was very little adolescence, and everything was grounded to the timing of the earth. They had tobacco parades here with tobacco queens. It was just like festivals in ancient agrarian societies where you had the Earth Mother and the particular plant of the locality would be mythologized. You see, so the tobacco was really a mythological thing too. And the whole town's economy was built on this. On the growing and the selling of tobacco in Virginia, particularly. Other southern states too. But as you went south, I think you had more what's called flue tobacco, which was tobacco used for cigarettes. And it was harvested differently. But here, what was unique was that it was the family farm. And these in rolling hills, you weren't able to have huge plantations. So back when there was slavery here, but it was always small farm slavery. You didn't have these big, huge plantations that you got down in the Tidewater area along the James River, where you had these huge flatland plantations where they grew cotton and so forth. This was more the rolling hills where it was small town. And the land grants here, you can trace them back to given by the King of England to anybody in England of the nobility who was going to leave England and go to Virginia. Well, here we'll give you a couple of 100 acres. So a lot of these families go way back. And there are many restored homes here that go back to the 1700s. But Virginia, I guess I'm on Virginia right now, and because Eldridge gets me in contact with this country, this land. I draw a parallel. It's kind of like he and I feel like are parallel train tracks going through, weed covered now. We're getting older, and his train was paint and mine was words, but yet they're parallel because he. Basically drew his inspiration from his roots here, his past, the farming, the tobacco culture that he remembers. So he stayed rooted in that. And of course, I've never had any roots. I grew up in a military family, so I moved every 2 years. And it wasn't until I met my wife and moved to Blackstone that there was a radical change in my life. And I decided, this is it. I'm going to sit under this Bodhi tree, like Buddha when he gave up trying out all the different yogas of his time and asceticism and following this guru and that. And he said, damn it, I've quit this. I'm just going to sit under this tree until I dig down into the root of existence and tap into the wellspring of being, So he just sat under a tree and went down instead of horizontal. And so Bagley has done that. He sat in Southside and he dug down deep and he tapped into this wellspring of being and upflowed his art. And it just, every year, he just catches this water, this art, and puts it on these paintings and sells them, and he makes a great living this way. But he stayed in contact with the wellspring. I had to discover it. He grew up with it. I had to find it by staying in one spot and starting to dig down. You see, we live in a horizontal, flat universe. flat world. So we're always looking along. It's over there. It's over that way. It's either in the past or the future, but we got to get there, you see. We don't just sit in one spot and dig down. No, it's horizontal. Go west, young man. Go east. Don't go down, you see. So in a way, you know, we both kind of like, I came here and planted myself in Blackstone and started to dig down. And he just dug down where in the farming life that he grew up in, you know, so he just never left, you know. But in the same way, we are vertical people in the sense that the source of our being comes from within and flows up, and it flows out of me in my writing or daily talks or whatever I discover and share on Facebook. But it's in words, you know. And so Bagley's is in paintings, visual, you see. So his brush paints his message, and I paint it with words, you see. But in the same way, it's coming from the same source, you see. So, in painting and art, and my talks are metaphorical, in the sense that a metaphor is like a compass with two legs. One leg, the center leg, is centered in the ground of one's being, and the other one roams around in time, and it's in time, and it creates because the other leg is grounded in the timeless. So when you ground, when you find your timeless being, when you find your ground, then your temporal life then becomes creative, whatever it is, in whatever format or medium you work with. I work with words. He works with painting, you see. But the point I'm making is that there are two legs to our compass, and if one has to be grounded in Sheldon's spot, you know, Big Bang, Sheldon's spot, that's a metaphor. Of course, it points to something very funny in the sitcom. Sheldon's at a couch, you see. So one leg points to the couch, but the other leg points to the transcendent. So where is your Sheldon spot? Where is your spot? Is it moving around looking for it? Is it here? Is it there? Is it tomorrow? Is it yesterday? Or is your Sheldon spot in the timeless being that is beneath or transcends temporality and time and form, you see? Form is changing, dying, being born, you see. But your grounding, your Sheldon spot is deep within, it's vertical. So in order to find that, in order to get your compass grounded in your spot, you have to stop. You see, you have to stop looking for your spot, because your spot is where you're at. Wherever you are, that's your spot. Wherever you are is your spot. It can't be any different than where you are, you see. So it doesn't mean you have to stay where you are. It just means that wherever you are is your spot, and it's out of that spot that your wellspring will flow, and your insight and your creativity and your joy will flow out of that. But you have to tap into the spot you're in, rather than saying my spot is tomorrow, or I'll get to it, or it's yesterday, it'll never come back again, it's gone, or I'll get to it, you see. That spot doesn't exist. Your Sheldon spot, the perfect spot, is always the place you're in. So I guess this, I chose to stay here and stop moving, and in this big old house, and so I don't have any desire to go out looking for experience or to go out looking for adventure and everything. I've got so much going on right here. My journey is internal. When I read or study or meditate, it's like it's bubbling up this way, and I think the same with Eldridge, although his wellspring comes up in paint, in pictures, you see. And so I really, the Zen of Eldridge Bagley is the Zen of awakening, the Zen of, well, I don't even know what I'm saying right here, so forget that. So anyway, check out, of course you can Google up Eldridge Bagley and see all of his paintings on Google Images. And, so anyway, thank you for dropping in, and stay cool here in Southside, Virginia.